All right. A friend of mine asked me a question, a fellow foster parent, about jealousy. This and It was in a Bible study that we're doing, and I started to answer the question. Um, you know, in the chat thing, and I just didn't feel like I was going to be able to get my message across well without my tone of voice and everything else. So I didn't want to be misunderstood. So anyway, I thought I would just go ahead and record this. So at first, I didn't think, we're reading the book of James, and we're in James chapter 1. And at first, I didn't think I could really relate. But then I remembered that there was definitely a time in my life when I really did struggle with jealousy, and that was when I was in Iraq. But before I get into that, let's just talk about what James chapter 1 says about jealousy. It says, believers who are poor have something to boast about, for God has honored them. And those who are rich should boast that God has humbled them. They will fade away like like a flower in the field. The hot sun rises, the grass withers, the little flower droops and falls, and its beauty fades away. In the same way, the rich will fade away with all their achievements. Okay, so this is talking about perspective, and this earth is short and temporary, and one day, a million years from now, we're going to look back on our time on earth, and it's going to seem like a bad day, and the difference between somebody who is rich and someone who is poor, or someone who has a great, happy, healthy family, and somebody who struggles, to serve foster children. The differences between their experience on Earth, I think, will certainly be largely swallowed by just the beauty and wonder of an eternity in heaven. So our perspective, and I think we all know and understand this. When we were children, we didn't have, we couldn't understand that the things that would make us so upset were really so simple, so small, and so insignificant, and so temporary. And so, we might be jealous that someone had a toy that we didn't have, or whatever. But as we grew, I think I can think about that, and that's true of me. And maybe that's another time I was jealous, of growing up poor, and only having hand-me-down clothes and hand-me-down toys. Yeah, there were definitely times I was jealous of the toys other kids had, but the character that developed in me, having grown up poor, I wouldn't trade that for all to go back and to give myself all those stupid toys. I'm so thankful, actually, that I faced a little extra hardship as a child, and productive hardship. But anyway, okay, so that's what James chapter 1 says about about jealousy, is that this world is temporary, that God has honored the poor, or the person who is less blessed in whatever area, and that is developing their character, and is a sort of a vote of confidence, as it were, from God, saying, hey, listen, I trust this person to be poor, I trust this person to be challenged in whatever way. And on the other hand, this other person, maybe they don't, God can tell they don't have the character to be poor, so he hasn't given them that opportunity to develop character in that way, and so. The poor can boast in their poverty. Now, obviously, we can't really boast in anything other than Christ himself. But anyway, that's what it says. And on top of all of that, it's so temporary, right? Now, let's get personal, okay? I did talk about growing up poor, and not wanting to change that, and I wouldn't. But there was a time when I was in Iraq, when I definitely struggled with jealousy. I was jealous of all of the Americans that were not in Iraq, all the Americans who were not serving. I was jealous that soldiers who had served tours, multiple tours sometimes in Iraq, were getting stop-lossed and forced to go back to Iraq when they were, when their contracts, the contracts that they signed with the U.S. government said they could get out of the Army, and yet the Army was stop-lossing and extending their contracts against their will, forcing them to go back to Iraq again. And if it hadn't been for my knee injury, I would have been one of those soldiers. I didn't think any of that was fair, and to be honest, it wasn't. It wasn't at all. But life's not fair, and when I look back on it, here I was living in this tiny, dirty can that is smaller than this room, for a year, often on a cot or sleeping on the ground, and going on missions where I was carrying, 80 pounds of weapons and ammo and body armor and crap, and just humping through the desert with all of this stuff, and it was 130 degrees, or in the winter it actually gets cold. Anyhow, long story short, it sucked, and I was jealous at times, especially during the boring times, the monotonous times, which was most of the time, but at the same time, you have to ask, is the lifeguard jealous of the sunbathers? Yeah, probably. They're sitting out in the hot sun. Their experience of the beach is very different because they have to stay vigilant the whole time. Then there was that one day in Iraq when everything went down, and when my team was in, a terrible firefight. And in that moment, which started with me being shot, and in that moment, in my, greatest fear, I wasn't jealous, I wasn't, of the fact that here I was, shot on a battlefield. Meanwhile, there were a bunch of Americans at home sitting on their couches who were completely unaware of what was going on. I was alive, Yeah, I was shot, but I was alive, and I was serving my purpose, and I ran back up that hill, back into the line of fire, right? And I defended my team, and we won that day. And now when I see the American flag, those red stripes on the American flag that represent the blood of the soldiers who have, who purchased the freedom of this country, I can look at those stripes and I can say, you know what? One drop of my blood helped stain those stripes red. And I can be proud of my country and of what I have given to serve it. And it pales in comparison to the men from the greatest generation, or the men who suffered through Vietnam or World War I or the Civil War or the Revolutionary War. It pales in comparison to their sacrifice. But at least when the call came, I answered it, and I had the opportunity to prove my mettle, in combat. Now, with that said, I've left that type of combat now. Actually, I want to talk about one other day that I was really jealous. I was sitting in DFW on my way back. This was mid-tour leave. You actually get a little bit of a break in the middle of this 15-month deployment to go home and see your family. I was on my way home, and I got an email, or I got to this to check my email in the airport, and one of my soldiers, emailed me and said, "Hey, listen, your buddy Sergeant Horner is dead. He was shot in the neck yesterday. I just thought you'd want to know." I was so angry and so jealous of all of the people who didn't even know Bruce, right? And in that moment, I didn't want to know Bruce. I wanted to be, fat and happy and sitting on some, comfortable couch somewhere. And I didn't want to have to know the people who were suffering. I didn't want to have had to go into Bruce's can and to see taped up on his wall these pictures of his lovely wife who he was so proud of. It was like the first thing. He said, "Hey, this is my wife. This is my wife." And I was like, "Wow, how did a goofball like this get such a pretty wife?" But he was such a nice guy, you know. And just to think about that, and to think, man, this woman is in Germany right now, and she is a widow, and I have to know that. I have to, and all of these people walking around this airport have no idea about any of that, right? And I've got to sit in this tragedy, you know? Like, it wasn't fair, and it's not, okay? Now, fast forward to right now. I'm a foster parent. This fight is harder than Iraq ever was. Like, it never ends, it seems like. In some ways, I can understand a little bit better those guys from that Greatest Generation who went over, you know, who landed on the beaches of Normandy, and they did not come home until that battle was won. You know, I left when my tour was up in Iraq. But those boys in Europe, you know, that went over, they didn't come home until until World War II was over, you know. And when I signed up to be a foster parent, and when I signed up to be an adoptive parent, I signed up for, you know, decades of service. I am so glad I did. Yeah, there's times when I maybe wish that I had an easy life and an easy family, you know, and easy children. But this battle is so much harder than Iraq ever was, and so much more important. And I know, thankfully, because of my experience in Iraq, that there will be moments when I will be wounded in this fight. I will be bloodied on the battlefield, and I will have the opportunity to get back up and to run back into harm's way and to love my family in ways that nobody else in the world can, because they're sitting on their couches doing whatever they're doing. And I am so thankful that I am living this life, which, to be honest, at many times is so hard, but is so good. And it's so temporary. That's the other thing, you know. Jaden's 16 now, you know. Shoot, she's going to be 2 more years, and she's going to be an adult, you know. And, you know, Reagan is 6, so another 12 years, and she's going to be an adult. And it's flying by. So, at least right now it's flying by. Maybe tomorrow I'll be in the thick of something, and I'll just want to curl up on that couch over there, and it's happened. And I just won't want to face it. But you know what? When this is all over, it's gonna. I know how this ends. I will look back and I will be proud of the opportunity to bleed the stripes red for these children. And it reminds me of Teddy Roosevelt's speech that he gave in France, I think, called Citizen in a Republic. And he talks about the man in the arena. You know what? Thankfully I have the internet right here. And he says, it's not the critic who counts. It's not that guy sitting on the couch who counts, right? It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man or woman, the foster parent, who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs. Oh my God, who errs? Yes, who errs every single day, who comes up short again and again and again. Because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, to love the children, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself or herself in a worthy cause, and who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he or she fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his or her place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat.